Welcome to An Author's Voice, where I'll discuss the craft behind writing and illustrate the points with my own work or discuss other well-known examples. The chapter you can't write. Every craft podcast tells you to push through. On this, every craft podcast is wrong. Or to be fair, right about half the time, badly wrong the other half. And nobody teaches you which half you're in. Most working writers have lived the bad version. A chapter you couldn't draft for 3 weeks. You finally forced it onto the page, and the prose just sat there, dead, through 3 rounds of revision. Then you accepted what the book had been telling you the whole time. That chapter didn't belong in the book you were actually writing, so you cut it. The weeks were gone. The forced draft was worse than nothing, and you didn't know there were 2 kinds of stuck until the second kind cost you a month. There are 2 kinds of stuck. 4 questions will tell you which one you're facing before you waste the 3 weeks finding out the hard way. First, the advice that's sometimes right. The motivation case is real. Sometimes you're stuck because you're tired or scared of a hard scene or pulled away by life or just out of practice. In those cases, the usual advice works exactly like the advice books say. Butt in chair, lower the bar, get something down, fix it later. The block is in you, and discipline really is the cure. Here's the tell. This kind of stuck follows you around. If you sat down today and tried to draft a different chapter, any chapter, you'd be stuck on that one too. The book is fine. You're the problem. The advice books have good reason to lead with this. For first-time novelists and hobby writers, the usual failure really is, I don't have the discipline yet. Push through is a fine default for the people the advice is aimed at. But the people it's aimed at and the people who hear it aren't the same group. A working novelist on chapter 14 of book 3 gets the same line as a hobbyist on chapter 2 of book 1. The line was tuned for the second case. When the first writer follows it on the wrong chapter, the cost is dead prose and lost weeks, and a chapter they cut anyway. The advice fits when the resistance is general. It misfires, sometimes badly, when the resistance sticks to one chapter, and you can learn to tell the difference. Because the manuscript knows things the outline didn't. Here's the shift that did the most for my own work, once I learned to trust it. An outline is a guess about the shape of the book. The draft tests that guess. By chapter 14, the book has piled up choices, character growth, world details, and pacing facts the outline never saw coming. The outline made an educated guess. The draft has been quietly correcting it the whole way. The chapter that won't draft usually belongs to an older version of the story. The outline planned it for the book you meant to write. The book you're actually writing has moved on. As outlined, the chapter assumes something that turned out to be false. Maybe the reader knows something the book hasn't shown yet. Maybe the character has drive or power the book hasn't earned. Maybe the story is at a beat the book is actually past or hasn't reached. Or the point of view picked for the chapter is the wrong one for the job. When any of these is true, the chapter fights you because there's nothing honest to draft. The prose can't show a scene the rest of the book doesn't support. That fight, the thing you experience as block, is the book refusing to lie. This is why forced versions of these chapters come out dead. You can produce sentences. The sentences can't do story work, because the job the chapter was built for no longer matches the job the book needs. The chapter sits in the draft, like a wall built in the wrong part of the house, holding up nothing. Sooner or later, you notice and cut it. I've watched this happen in my own books and in friends' manuscripts from my writing group. The shape repeats often enough that I now treat it as the first explanation for chapter-specific stuck. So here's the shift. Getting stuck on one chapter is information. The book is telling you, in the only language it has, that the chapter you planned doesn't fit the book you actually wrote. Listen. The question changes from, how do I force this chapter onto the page, to, what is this resistance telling me about what the book has become? Which brings us to the 4 questions. Listening sounds vague. These 4 questions make it concrete. Run them in order and stop at the first one that fails. Question 1. Can you say in one sentence what this chapter has to do for the larger story? If you can name a clean job for it, go to question 2. If you can't, the resistance is structural. The chapter has no clear job in the book as it stands now. Maybe you outlined something that was never really a chapter, or it was a chapter once, and the book handled its job somewhere else while the outline stayed the same. Don't force it, cut it, or rebuild it around a job you can name. Question 2. Has the book earned what this chapter assumes? For the chapter to land, some things have to be in place already. A relationship, a fact, a stake, a character's mood. Check the actual pages. The outline thought the setup was done by Chapter 8. Open Chapter 8 in the draft and see if it's there. If the conditions are in place, keep going. If they're missing, the problem lives upstream. Drafting this chapter without the setup produces prose that asks the reader to feel something the book hasn't earned. The fix belongs in the earlier scene that should have planted what this chapter expects to find. Question 3. Is the point of view character the right one to carry this chapter? The outline picked the point of view. The draft has been growing the characters sometimes faster than the outline guessed. The right point of view for Chapter 6 might be wrong for Chapter 14, because the character has changed, or because the events land stronger from inside someone else's head. The test. Can this character see what happens here, and care about it, in a way that gives the reader something worth sitting inside? If your honest answer is, the outline said this character, instead of, this character is the only one who can show what the scene needs, the point of view may be wrong. Try the chapter from another character's head and see what loosens. Question 4. Are you stuck on this chapter or stuck in general? This is the motivation test, and it comes last on purpose. It only means something after you've ruled out the structural problems. The warm-up check. Could you draft a different chapter today, one you've already drafted and revised, and write honest prose? If yes, the stuck is chapter-specific, and the first 3 questions should have caught it. If they didn't, run them again with fresh eyes. If no, the stuck is general. It's motivation. The usual advice fits. Lower the bar, get words down, fix later. The order matters. Start with question 4, and you'll treat every structural problem as a willpower problem. Then spend a month digging the wrong hole deeper. Only push through when 1, 2, and 3 all pass and 4 points to general stuck. Now here's where it gets tricky. Honest concession. Sometimes the chapter that won't draft is the chapter you discover the book through. Some writers, especially discovery writers who think by drafting, work through structural problems by writing into them. The forced draft isn't always wasted. Sometimes the dead prose is you learning what the chapter needs to be, by writing the wrong version and seeing what's wrong with it. The catch, this works best when you know that's what you're doing. The forced draft as exploration is a different animal from the forced draft as panic. The first is listening with a pen in your hand. The second is shouting over the book and hoping volume counts as craft. Notice which one you're doing. If the forced prose turns up real insight, if you end the session knowing more about the book than when you started, keep going. If it turns up dead sentences and self-blame, stop and run the questions. The difference is usually clear by the end of the second hour, if you're honest about what's on the page. So here's the takeaway. The chapter you can't write is usually a chapter the book has moved past. Sometimes the book is the smarter party in the room, and resistance is the only way it can tell you so. Next time a chapter won't draft, run the 4 questions before you call it block. Stop at the first failure and treat that failure as your answer. Most of the time, the trouble sits upstream, in some assumption the book has quietly dropped. Fix that and the chapter writes itself. Or you'll find the chapter never needed to exist, and the book has been telling you so for weeks while you argued with the decision it had already made. Until next time, thanks for listening. Thanks for listening to this episode. If you'd like to hear or read more of this sort of thing, subscribe to my email list and follow me on social media using the link below, or search online for Charlie Forit, and you will likely find me. Until next time, thanks for following along. Voices for this recording provided by Speechify. All content written by Charlie Forit. Any opinions expressed in this recording are solely the author's. Learn more at charlieforet.com.